Hello, 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 everybody out there. You are not listening to Jonathan Macri, nor are you listening to Andrew Claudio, nor are you listening to Shawn with a W. This is none other than your boy Mensa Smith here with Shawn with a W and my boy XJ. We are the casual crew, down one person, but that's because he is sick with a virus that he can get over, but it will happen soon. Don't worry about it. We are here to bring you guys Casual Friday with takes hotter than the Miami Heat, who aren't that hot, but that's another story for another day. XJ, how are the vibes, my friend?
I mean, the vibes are a little confused, I would say. I have mixed emotions right now. I'm sure many Knicks fans have mixed emotions right now. But I'm still optimistic. I'm still feeling good. So, coming off the big win against Miami, I mean, you can't downplay that enough. One of the biggest wins of the season, one of the biggest wins of the decade. Hard to understate it. So, still feeling good about that. Still feeling good about the potential for the future. To put a word to the vibes, it's got to be conflicted. It's got to be good but conflicted.
Okay, that's a great answer. I agree. We did with the tough news with Julius Randle being out for 2 weeks, but we'll get into that in a second. So, Shawn, how about you? How are the vibes, my friend?
I would say the vibes are rebounding because the vibes were low after our little 3-game losing streak. But even during that 3-game losing streak, we actually managed to gain ground on the teams behind us. So, and now they were up last night. We're recording this on Thursday evening after we beat Miami. And now they've come down again with the news that Julius Randle will be out for at least 2 weeks with the ankle sprain. So, and there was a lot of, since the last time we had a podcast, there was a lot of downtime. And you know what happens when there's a lot of downtime between Knicks games? People need to fill that downtime with all types of poppycock foolishness and other types of junk. But I would say the vibes are rebounding, and they are still rebounding up despite the news that we learned about, a half hour ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Rebounding and conflicted. For me, the vibes are. Wow, that's a good question, man. So, how are the vibes? I'm looking for a good answer.
What is
Tough
the
act
answer
to
to my
follow.
own question?
You stumped yourself, man.
Exactly. The vibes stumped me. I don't know. There we go. The vibes are confusing. That's a good answer. Um, yeah, it's tough. We are, personally, I think that we've won games without basically everybody in the starting lineup. This is Julius Randle's first time leaving the starting lineup. I think Quentin Grimes may have played every game. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like the main characters of this Knicks team so far, except for Emmanuel Quickly, who I also think has played in every game. Jalen Brunson, we've been able to sustain some wins without him. RJ Barrett, we've been able to sustain some wins without him. Mitchell Robinson, who at the time was the linchpin of our defense, we were able to sustain some wins without him. I don't see why it should be any different for Julius Randle, and I'm not using the Julius Randle injury as an excuse for the Knicks to drop 2 of the next 3 or 3 of the next 5. Like, there's no excuse for it. The job remains the same, and if we want to, if as a fan base and as a team, we want to say that we have the deepest team in basketball, which I firmly believe, then this Julius Randle injury shouldn't stop a thing. We have a really tough matchup today, the day you guys are listening to this, against the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll see what these guys are made of, but I'm confident that the Knicks aren't going to roll over for anybody. Josh Hart is still playing. Emmanuel Quickly is still playing. Quentin Grimes is still playing. Jalen Brunson is playing. I don't know how healthy he is, but he's playing. We got Hartenstein, Mitchell Robinson, Deuce McBride. This team, Obi Toppin, this team has the guns to shoot with anybody, even if we're missing one guy. 2 and 3 is a little different, but without Julius Randle, we should still be able to move forward. And there's one player that I left out of the guns that we have, and I think that's just is a good transition to our first topic. Today, we're not doing boxing one, we're doing the triangle offense. And if the triangle offense still offends you, first thing, that was 6 years ago. Second, the triangle offense wasn't the problem. It was the person who thought the triangle would solve world hunger who was the problem. So we're going to go with the good old triangle offense. And for me, we're going to start off with, the RJ Barrett conversation, friends. I am known as Knicks Film School's preeminent RJ Barrett supporter, and I am not afraid of that. I think RJ Barrett deserves our support because he wears a jersey that says New York on the front of it, and he plays for our basketball team, so that's important. However, if we want to talk about RJ Barrett, let's get some things out of the way. RJ Barrett, of the 9 guys in the rotation right now, over the course of this season, has been the least impactful. Over the course of the season, he's had higher highs than some guys, and he's definitely had lower lows than some guys. But right now, he is the least impactful basketball player in the rotation, especially in the starting lineup. I don't think that's arguable if you like numbers, or if you like advanced numbers. If you like counting numbers, okay, he's scoring 20 and 19. All good things. Don't get me wrong. The defense has not been there all year. Has not been there. That's another thing. Inexcusable. This guy was picked 3rd overall in 2019 behind Zion Williamson, perennial All-NBA candidate when he's healthy, and Ja Morant, perennial All-NBA candidate, even when he's a little nicked up. RJ Barrett, that was the standard, and he was the number 1 recruit coming out of high school. He has underwhelmed in his NBA career relative to expectations. That is very fair. However, when RJ Barrett misses a jump shot, the economy is not crashing. When RJ Barrett turns the ball over, the climate is not getting any hotter. When RJ Barrett misses a defensive assignment, that is not evidence that he was present on January 6th. We need, as a fan base, to come to grips with the reality that the conversation has shifted way too far in the wrong direction. I don't believe in hives in general, but for me, I first started noticing this about 3 months ago. Whenever like anything RJ Barrett did, you would see tweets bad about it. And then a lot of it, this was like right before, I would say like 3 months ago, right before the conversation got really, really toxic about RJ. You would see tweets about it. People would get on podcasts and talk about it. And there would still be like, I feel like the fan base at that point was more like 60-40 still in favor of RJ Barrett, because we had just seen him, if we're talking 3 months ago, we had just seen him put together some really good games. However, now when RJ Barrett does things, it's just like, it doesn't matter. If he misses a layup, we're not losing points. Like, it's gotten to a place where we cannot have an objective conversation about RJ Barrett because everybody's feelings are in the way. It's like, okay, if RJ Barrett were an effective basketball player this season, if he was playing well, if he had a positive VORP, positive BPM, positive win shares, whatever EPM, whatever your advanced stat du jour is, if he had a positive one of those, then yes, the New York Knicks would likely be in contention for the 3rd seed, because we're losing a lot with RJ Barrett this year. But the way the conversation has shifted, and I get it's been 4 years, don't get me wrong, this is still a 22-year-old basketball player. That's the first thing. The second thing is he has improved in his most, to me, important skill, which is driving to the basket and finishing. His 2-point percentage is around 50% this year. The issue is with the 3-point volume. He needs to get rid of that, amongst other things, as far as the scoring goes. We're just talking about the scoring here. He's the 3rd option for maybe the first time in his life. Let's talk about that. You see what's going on in Trae Young? Well, I'm sorry, in Atlanta with Trae Young having to share the ball for the first time in his life and how that team is struggling. It's hard for guys to adjust, even if we have expectations that they should be this and they should be that. Adjusting requires an adjustment, period. And I get, we've been patient. We've been waiting for him to turn the corner. He hasn't turned the corner. He's been giving us the glimpses, and it's the consistency that is the issue. I don't mind that. I don't mind having discussions about RJ Barrett when it comes to rational thinking. When we have to go on rants, when we have to disparage him, when we have to make troll accounts to talk about RJ Barrett and pull up old tweets and all kind of craziness about a basketball player who, honestly, if RJ Barrett hits, you're talking about a 2-way wing in the NBA with a high score, with a high usage. If you look at the history of basketball, show me the team with the best 2-way wing with a high usage, and I'll show you a contender every single year. He plays the most valuable position in basketball. It takes time for guys like him to get it going. He may never hit. That's the reality at this point. We have to face that reality that he may never be a good basketball player because over 4 years he's been inconsistent. He hasn't ever been good. He's shown us highs, he's shown us lows. But when we get to the place when we're saying some of the things people are saying, it's like I really don't know how to put it. But here's what I would say. If you root for the New York Knicks, try not to say things that in a year you will have to say, I was too hard on him, I was this, I was that, because you're losing the essence of fanhood. I understand we want our team to do well, and when we see a guy who is getting in the way of that, it sucks. I hated Elfrid Payton. Julius Randle last year, oh my goodness, he upset me so much. RJ Barrett, his mentality, what he means to this team, what he wants to be here, the fact that he's never been a locker room cat, like all of those things, all the positives shouldn't outweigh the negatives, but it should keep people from every time he misses a jump shot, every time he makes a mistake, for jumping on his back. I think at this point, the conversation for some people has gotten childish, and as fans, we need to grow up a little bit.
That was a lot. I'll say this. The tweet that I have pinned to my Twitter profile is 3 words, and it's happiness equals reality minus expectations. And it's the symbols. So I know he's like, that's 5 words. Like, no, it's 3 words, equal sign and minus sign. Happiness equals reality minus expectations. And, when you're the third pick in the draft, you have expectations. And it doesn't help when the 2 people in front of you, when they're playing, look like, all world players. Keyword, when they're playing, during halftime last night, during the halftime Zoom that John hosts, there was a lot of, I don't want to say vitriol, but a lot of anger, or disappointment. That's a better word. Disappointment to RJ, because he was all of 8 from the field in the first half. And I actually have his shot charted from last night. And like in the first quarter, he took 5 shots. 4 of them were in the paint, like missed floater, missed finger roll, missed 4-point shot, and another missed floater. And I said in the Zoom yesterday, like, RJ's mistakes, misses, whatever you want to call them, are as visually unappealing as they are in the league. I want to give a shout out to Danny Gardner, because Danny Gardner came in and he's like you. He's an RJ. I mean, I'm an RJ supporter too, but like, he takes it back for RJ mostly when, he's catching hell. And he said what you said. It's like, we can't, like, it's one thing, you want to get mad at RJ for missing an assignment. Yes. You want to get mad at RJ for getting blown by. Yes. You want to get mad at RJ for missing for like losing track of Jimmy freaking Butler. Fine. We can't get all bent out of shape because he misses shots. Because everybody misses shots. Jalen Brunson misses shots. Julius Randle misses shots. Quentin Grimes misses shots. Deuce McBride misses shots. Everyone misses shots. So if his process is good and he misses shots, like, we cannot, like, to Mensa's point, we cannot act like, he cannot act like he stole the Constitution, ran off with it. The discourse has gotten out of control, but unfortunately, in the age of social media, and like I said earlier in the vibe check, like, when you have downtime, you got to fill with something. And like a friend of mine said for years, he said this for years, the 24-hour news cycle demands fake news. So you got to come up with something. And now we have people coming up with everything. And and yes, I understand he's a third pick in the draft. Yes, I understand this is year 4. Yes, I understand he got paid. But when I was a kid and you watch and kids got drafted, kids got, like, your peak is at 27. That's your prime. And guess what? Most kids got drafted at 21, 22, 23. So in 4 years in, they hit their prime. Guess what happens when you get drafted 19? You got 8 years to get there. And when the guys like Ja hit, that's the exception, not the rule. Now, granted, this team, every situation is different, but we have to listen. If we can give Julius Randle grace for telling us to shut the you know what up, and those are his exact words, and he's a grown man, he's 28 years old. We can, and listen, it's frustrating. Like the consistency, like we would love the consistency, but we gotta relax a little bit. Just relax.
So I put up a poll recently the other day on Twitter, asking fans who would they want to move this offseason if they had to choose between Grimes, RJ, Hart, and Quickly. Some of the feedback I got was like, dude, you're just putting this up to get people to roast RJ. Like, okay, obviously these people don't know me at all.
I saw that. I was like, people do not know who XJ is if they think that's what he's doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that because that's what I had in my head. But then other people were like, hey man, like kind of whispering, like, hey man, don't post this, this is just gonna result in people just like roasting RJ. And I think it's true, but it's just like we're at the point with RJ where people feel like I can't post a question that I am personally very interested in for a number of reasons that, is a tangential to this, so I won't get into it. But we got to be super hush. We got to be super hush about saying RJ because invoking his name will simply lead to hundreds of fans flocking in simply to shit on him. Like, so I can't have a question about that includes the name RJ Barrett. Like, I don't expect fans to be level-headed and like hyper rational. None of us are. I'm not, but with RJ, it's like things are on another level. Like I totally agree with Shawn. RJ is truly a victim of expectations. When you get your hopes up about something or someone and you feel disappointed, you feel like you lost something. I think that's a thing that people experience. It feels like a loss. And there's a concept in behavioral science called loss aversion, which basically says we feel more negative about a loss than we feel positive about a gain. So it's like, I think it's just really painful to people who have already written RJ off as like the possibility of becoming a really good either role player, a really good starter, or, like that third guy that on a championship team. If people have written him off for any of those levels, they feel like they lost something. And if RJ doesn't pan out, we'll likely feel worse about that than we feel good about something like quickly providing top 5 pick value at the 25th overall pick. And I think that that's a function of human nature to some extent. And it just, everything obviously gets exacerbated on social media. And people just feel like they can let all their frustrations out. And so like, I understand it to the extent that it feels like it makes sense from a human nature standpoint. But do I understand it from the standpoint of like, we should be doing this, we should condone it? Like it makes sense from a fan standpoint or from a Knicks fan standpoint? No, not at all. Like, so yeah, I think it's extremely frustrating. I'm an RJ fan. I think that I was tweeting, or Frank Barrett tweeted this the other day. We should all be RJ fans. Like we're all Knicks fans. We should all be RJ fans. Like that. There's nobody who should be hating RJ Barrett because he is not the player you thought he would be when he was drafted number 3rd overall. Like, first of all, give him time. He still needs more time. Second of all, we don't know what his ceiling is going to be. And third of all, like, even if he's not going to be that guy or he doesn't end up being that guy, it doesn't require this level of vitriol and hostility. It's just excessive. So yeah, I don't know what to say about it besides it's just excessive.
Yeah, excessive is the word. And as we lost Shawn for a second, hopefully he gets pulled back up soon. The thing that bothers me most about it is it's almost like RJ Barrett has become like a distraction for other fans. For fans, and we're not focusing on all the ills of the other players. Like on the playback last night, XJ, you were right there with me. Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
was the most traffic Coney he has ever been in his life.
It was bad. It was bad. Yeah,
It
early
was
in the
terrible.
game. Yeah.
Everybody, hold on 1 second for me as I troubleshoot my light here. Let's just
Yeah, but just to your point, I mean, yeah, Jalen Brunson early in the game was looking like a traffic cone. I don't know if it was just from rust or whatever. There was that one, I don't know if it was Hero or who it was, but just like completely dusted him.
It was Victor Oladipo, who
that's who it was.
turned him around. It was embarrassing. And I get it. Like, listen, I understand that this happens because, he's coming back from an injury, but that kind of grace, and you can argue that maybe RJ Barrett has not earned the grace that a guy like Jalen Brunson has earned. But if you're paying attention to Jalen Brunson throughout the season, he has not been good on defense. Like, he hasn't, and we're not talking about it. And we'll get into some of these things later on as it comes to like playoff concerns. But when he makes a bad play, crickets. When Julius Randle makes a bad play, you might hear little groans from all the residual angst that Julius Randle has earned over 4 seasons. Anybody else makes a bad, Quentin Grimes is taking heat checks. Quentin Grimes is taking heat checks. Like, look, I get it. I understand. He's been great recently. He has not earned heat checks. Let's be very clear about that. Everybody on the court makes mistakes. That's my point. But if RJ Barrett does something that is a regular basketball occurrence, it gets to be, it's gotten frustrating for me, and it's only frustrating because it's been hypocritical, I think. Yeah, it's been really tough to see how this fan base has turned on him. And I don't want to get into like some of the easy narratives like, oh, this is why you can't rebuild in New York. Because in fairness, RJ Barrett has had 4 years. I'm not, I get it. I understand it. And I'm not saying, and I want to be very clear about this, I'm not saying that it is wrong to be frustrated with RJ. I am not saying that it is wrong to be upset. I am not saying that RJ Barrett has not earned his fair share of criticism. I'm saying if you reacted to RJ Barrett missing a layup the same way you reacted when you found out what was happening at the Capitol when Donald Trump told them people to go down there and show their strength, you might need to, like, I don't know, go outside, touch some grass, stretch,
Relax.
go talk to your family, relax, a whole bunch of things. And like, let's just have, all conversations we can have, whatever. But when it comes to our fanhood, let's remember that we're fans. That's as far as I would go with it.
And I'll say this. I'm tired of people saying like, well, fan is short of fanatic. Like, yeah, yes, I understand that. However, there has to be something very even keeled. Like, you can still be even keeled. You don't have to go 100 miles an hour. As we say in New York, please just keep the same energy. Like RJ Barrett, like, listen, he has been the number 2 scorer for a playoff team at age 20, and he's the number 3 scorer for the 5th seed at age 22. And you know something, he plays every game if he's available, unless it's crazy stuff like, oh, I don't know, the head coach leaving him in at a 20-point blowout to roll his ankle, or Luka Doncic deciding to like chop his finger off, or things like that. He's there every single game because he is not somebody who really requires load management. Segue into our next topic, and I'm gonna let, I think XJ should lead this discussion.
I appreciate that segue, and I'm very excited to talk about this topic. I know a lot of people don't want to hear this topic. Hopefully, they will hear me out. They will hear us out, as we always have very productive discussions on Casual Fridays. I want to talk about load management. I know it's very scary 4 syllables. Let's get this out of the way first. I'm not bringing this up because Randall got hurt yesterday, and I believe his injury was due to load management. That's not why I'm bringing this up.
Are you sure?
As far as I am aware of my own thoughts, I'm sure. Yeah. But I do believe that Randall's resistance to load management and the Knicks' resistance as an organization or franchise, general resistance to load management is not the ideal approach in the modern era of basketball. If This is very important if your primary goal is to have postseason success. So I looked, there's a great Twitter page, and they also have a website called Man Games Lost NBA. And I looked, and the Knicks recently had the second least number of games missed by injured players, second only to Sacramento. So you might say, oh, this is great. They've been healthy all season. However, let's take a step back and consider the point of load management. So the goal of load management is to give teams the best chance to have their players at optimal health in the games that matter the most across the span of time that they play for the team. So I don't think there's actually any publicly available empirical data that provides like strong evidence for the idea that resting a player will reduce his chance of injury. So I'm clear on that. I don't think that data exists publicly. And I also know there aren't really reliable, like, that we know of, benchmarks that say like, hey, Quentin Grimes has hit his threshold on these 3 benchmarks. We should sit him because he's at greater risk for injury. Like, we're not that precise right now with the science, at least publicly. But it would just be really difficult to study that and get concrete evidence, given there's like all these confounding variables involved. At the same time, many sports scientists believe that some of the trends and anecdotal evidence that we've seen is strong enough to do these like load management programs or practices, whatever you want to call them. And even if you don't believe that, if you don't believe the sports scientists who believe in this, what we do know is that decreasing on-court time decreases the probability that a player sustains an injury. So that means a player who plays in like 60 games has fewer opportunities to get injured than a player who plays in 82 games. That's just deductively true. Like, we don't need research to confirm that. That's just true. And another thing I want to say is that we all know the Stan Van Gundy tweet where he says, I'm just going to paraphrase it because I don't have it in front of me, but he says like the 90s, they didn't load manage, but now that teams value rest over practice, like, injuries and missed games are all up. So that means that it's not working. I think a lot of people agreed with that, but you can't accurately really like draw conclusions like that because there's just, like I said, there's too many variables involved. And I could give a ton of like reasons why injuries would be up despite load management actually working. I won't for the sake of time, but the point is that were it not for resting players, it's possible, and I would argue likely, that injuries would be up even more. So at the very least, what I want to say is that the Knicks are going to go into the postseason with Brunson probably a little banged up, Randall not there to start. And does that mean they've been taking the wrong approach to load management? So I have an opinion about that, but I want to let my colleagues talk about it first, and then I want to come back and just say what I think about that. But I'm curious what you both think. Maybe start with Mensa. What's your opinion on that?
So the load management conversation is hard to have personally because it gets a bit gamesmanshipy and can get a little murky, and ultimately, in my opinion, has diluted the regular season basketball product. It started, I think, with the San Antonio Spurs literally resting 4 starters on a national television game against the Miami Heat. And that started the conversation of what load management is doing. Like, I think honestly, load management as a term did not exist before then. I think it started with Kawhi Leonard.
So to cut you off, the term load management started with LeBron. I'm 90% sure of that because he missed the game and it was listed as load management. But to your point, the concept of load management started with that Spurs team against a nationally televised game against Miami. And it wasn't that they missed the game, it's that Popovich said, don't even bother getting on the flight. Just stay home. And that's when the whole thing started.
Yeah. So load management presents a problem when you from a for the love of the game standpoint, as far as diluting the regular season product. And we know, because this is a capitalist society, we will never have less than 82 games. If anything, they will add basketball games, and they have added basketball games to the schedule in the form of the play-in tournament. Those are added games. It's for me, it's a sore spot because I do agree that your best players. At least if you're gonna load manage at home. You know, like, and I don't know, like, but that's a different part of the conversation as far as like how do you protect fans from load management. But when it comes to having your players healthiest during the games that matter the most, I'm looking at the Western Conference and I know absolutely nobody wants to see the Clippers. I know absolutely nobody wants to see the Lakers right now. And those are teams that load manage their two stars. LeBron was a little less healthy. Let's be honest. Anthony Davis a little less healthy. But with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, that was absolutely load management. And now they are, I believe, in position for the 4 seed. They have a very tough matchup against the Suns. Don't get me wrong, but nobody wants to see them. Nobody. Because when Kawhi is right, he's, my goodness. To me, when Kawhi is right, he's on. Never mind. I'm not going to get into a hot take, but he's very, 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 very good. That's what I will say. That's where I'll leave
He's
it.
only played 47 games this season, by the way.
There you go. That's a little over half the season, and nobody wants to see them. As it pertains to the Knicks, if you could guarantee me that the Knicks would be playing at their 9-game winning streak level, oh, I'd take that. I'd take that. But I cannot be guaranteed that I'm going to get those Knicks, not only because Josh Hart is playing out of his mind. I don't know when that's going to stop, but because we have a hobble Jalen Brunson. We have a Julius Randle that just, you could say it's a freak accident. I would hear that argument. You could say that maybe he should have rested. I would not hear that argument because we were playing the Miami Heat and I hate the Miami Heat. But the concept of load management, I think, is an important one. I think that the Knicks, under this coach, will never load manage. And that may or may not end up being his downfall, depending on what star this team ends up attracting. Um, but yeah, I think it's a hard conversation to have, and I don't think that it's one for Twitter, especially. I think it's a conversation that needs to happen even above the podcasting level. It's like a panel kind of, like a seminar kind of conversation. So that's kind of where I like leave it because I try not to speak to things that I understand are above my depth. Um, but I will say from the fan perspective, it's conflicting because I want to see my guys every night, but I also want to beat the shit out of the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round. And I don't know how possible that is because our guys played the entire season. And they look very, very, very tired. It's been really bad these past couple games.
So for me, the whole load management conversation, and I'm actually been trying to confirm who started the load management term, is whether it's the Spurs or LeBron, but I think it's LeBron, but whatever. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle. Like the Stan Van Gundy quote grinds my gears because like you say, like, yeah, guys, no one did load management in the 90s. Yeah. And guess what? When someone tore their ACL, we're just like, oh, stinks for him. And we didn't think like, why didn't maybe he was tired? Like I remember when Kristaps Porzingis tore his ACL. And I remember for about a week and a half leading up to it, he was saying, like in interviews, he would say, like, I've never felt this tired as I've ever felt. And because it's funny, actually, and I had a little back and forth during the playback yesterday. And what I will say is that, like, when you're tired and you jump, you don't always land properly. And that can cause stress on soft tissue, hamstrings, ACLs, Achilles, whatever, right? So when he tore his ACL, after being devastated, I just kept remembering, like, this dude basically said he was tired for a week and a half. And Jeff Hornacek just was like, eh. But then again, I'm not surprised. Jeff Hornacek played in the 90s. No one rested. You just went until you couldn't go anymore.
Jeff Hornacek literally told Willie Hernan Gomez to tell Kristaps Porzingis to stop being a pussy. That happened. So more evidence to your side.
Yes. With that being said, like what XJ said is correct, that if you play 80 games, you'll be more likely to get injured by playing 60 than you by playing 60. But every player is different. And some guys can handle 80 games and some guys can handle 60. we don't know. We cannot look at all 450 players and figure out which ones can, which ones can't. I think some of them we can. Like there's a guy in LA who wears number 3. I don't think he should play 82 games, right? But guess what? We got
Neither
a guy.
do his bones. His bones don't agree either.
And we got a guy in New York that wears number 30 that would play 82 games unless otherwise noted. I think for me, it's just like common sense. Like I remember Popovich, who he is the godfather of this. Like for him, it wasn't about games; it was about minutes. Because if you like, for example, like Jaren Jackson Jr., I think has played like I remember when he got selected for the All-Star game, he played like 800 less minutes than like Anthony Davis or something like that, right? And it was like he's played all these games, but he's playing 28 minutes a game. The 2014 Spurs, who won a championship, no one averaged more than 29 minutes a game. So you can play 77 games if you play 29 minutes, but it's when you're playing 38 minutes a game that for 80 games, that's a problem. And for me, it's common sense. Like if I can see guys are winded, if I can see now guys are going under screens instead of fighting over them, if guys aren't rotating as much as they used to, if guys aren't closing out as much as easy as they used to in November, December, that is a thing. I actually remember watching the game yesterday and watching Julius, and Julius just looked disengaged. And I remember saying during the playback, I said, part of me feels like, and we were watching, them like the first couple of plays, like, okay, let's just have RJ in the post against Gabe Vincent. And I said, part of me feels like this is Thibodeau's way of saying, like, all right, here's how we'll give you rest. We'll just let you stand over here while RJ does this thing, carries the load. And I'm just like, bro, like, listen, load management, this discussion will last forever, or until, well, not forever, but for a long time across the league. In terms of the Knicks, load management has to be an organizational decision. And if your goal is to win the championship and your goal is to get to the finish line of the regular season with as many healthy people as possible, you, president of basketball operations, you, general manager, have to say, like, hey, head coach, and this is not just a Thibodeau thing. There's plenty of coaches that agree with him. Hey, we're taking this decision out of your hands. This guy is not going to play. Now, if you're doing it because you want to make sure they're fresh for the playoffs, that's one thing. If you're doing it because you want more ping pong balls, that's another discussion for another day, and we're not going to go down that road. But I think it is, to quote a famous rapper from Chicago, you ain't got the answers. Like, no one has the answers. However, the idea that, like, it shouldn't be considered, like, we should not consider it at all, I don't know if that is I don't know if that's a decision that I don't know if that's the hill that a team should die on. And the last thing I will say is that for other teams or the other teams in the league, load management exists for every other arena except for Madison Square Garden. Thank you very much.
So I mean, I largely agree with what a lot of you both said. I'm going to come back around and give my opinion on what the Knicks have done. So in my opinion, basically, in this case, I don't think the Knicks are doing the wrong thing by not engaging in load management like some other teams. So when I first brought up the topic, I said that the Knicks' resistance to load management is not the ideal approach if their primary goal is to have postseason success. I don't think that was their primary goal this season. The reality is that, yes, we would have a better chance to beat the Cavs in the postseason if we were fully healthy. That's true. We also would probably not be playing the Cavs if we load manage throughout the season. We always talk about the shift to the 9-man rotation as basically, correlating that with the Knicks' trajectory and improvement and overall success. But the shift to the 9-man rotation really just amounted to playing our better players more minutes and our players who were not as good fewer minutes. And one of the competitive advantages that the Knicks have had this season is that their best guys are on the court a lot more than the other team's best guys are on the court. And there's also that's also kind of like a reverse opportunity cost, because they also don't have their worst players on the court, but other teams do. So for the Knicks this year, the truth is really that the regular season was more important than the postseason will be. So I just think they made the right decision, because even if we lose in the first round, this season was a success. Now, moving forward, with the improvement that we'll see from these players and whatever additions they bring in, maybe the postseason will take on more importance. So the expectations will be ramped up. It's going to be about winning in the postseason, advancing to the second round, advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals. At that point, then they should start to load manage more, because you need to have guys fresh. You can't have guys who are on their last legs rolling into the first round of the playoffs. And it's better to just be a worse seed. Maybe they'll be good enough, and we all hope this, maybe they'll be good enough that even if they load manage and don't play their main guys a million minutes, maybe they'll still be good enough to be a fourth seed that has a bullet on it when they make it to the playoffs, because they're going to have all their guys fresh. They're going to be ready to go. And we will have not seen their best product during the regular season, but we will see it in the postseason. And the last thing, even on that note, and I think both of you kind of touched on this, especially I know Mensa mentioned something about this. Many of the same people who don't like load management, I think, also contribute to its prevalence. Because there are a lot of people who diminish the importance of the regular season. Like, for example, when they say, oh, the MVP award shouldn't be purely a regular season award. Postseason success should be counted. That should be relevant to whether you win MVP or not. And then you say, in the same breath, you should play every single game in the regular season. So is the regular season important and they should play every game, or should they rest the regular season and focus on what matters, which these people say that this is what matters. The postseason is what matters. Championships, rings, that's what matters. You can't have both. Because it'll always make sense to save up for the thing that matters more. So either the regular season matters and we care about that, and we care about guys who play a lot of games in the regular season, and we reward it. Hey, you're the MVP of the regular season because that meant something. Or, yeah, we don't really care about the regular season. That's cool. You were great during the regular season, but you haven't won championships. Okay, then we don't care about the regular season. Load manage, take 20 games off, rest yourself, get ready for the time when it actually matters. And that's what we care about as basketball fans. So we have to understand that if we're just propping up postseason success as above everything, that trumps all, then we are contributing to the incentives being aligned to load manage during the regular season. So that's the last thing I wanted to say about it.
I'll say one other thing. You brought up a good point, XJ, that like the part of success is part of our success is that we've had our best players on the court more than other teams have their best players. Where I think the little adjustment we need to make is our not as good players are often better than the other team's not as good players.
Yeah, for sure.
And those guys could play more. So, for example, Obadiah Toppin Jr. has played 893 minutes this year. I will put this in for the Knicks. Let me put this in perspective. Cam Reddish has played 437 minutes this year, and Cam Reddish has not played a game for the New York Knicks since December 3rd, 2022. Think about that. So the adjustment we have to make, and especially with now Julius out, listen, like to quote Eric Spoelstra, we have enough. But we have to make uses of that. Like, we have enough. But the enough can't be, all right, Josh Hart, who was playing 30 minutes a game for us, is now going to play 39. So that's just one example I want to give. So, anything else? I think we're good. I think we're done here. Anything else on your mind, guys?
As far as load management goes, no, I'm good. I think we've said all we needed to say.
Yeah, I think we said what we needed to say, and I think I think that we were able to, and at least I felt like I was able to hammer home the point that load management becomes a tension and a trade-off between the regular season and the playoffs.
It's a symptom.
It's absolutely a symptom, and I think that's probably a good segue to our last topic, which is about the future of the New York Knicks coming up in just 2 weeks. We're moving into play.
What do you mean playoffs?
We are moving into playoff time. So I mean, obviously, we're all super hyped about it. I can get us started on this topic. Of course, like we talked about, to kick off Casual Friday, the big news is Randall probably won't be available to start the postseason. He's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks. That's probably going to be. He could be reevaluated the day before Game 1 of the first round. So that can be either emotionally uplifting or draining. We'll see, depending on how the rest of this regular season goes. The loss of Randall, my instant reaction is obviously that's going to put a huge burden on Jalen Brunson. I think they're going to be forced to play a less ISO heavy style. And while I'm obviously horribly upset about Randall's injury, I am glad that it happened, if it had to happen, with a little bit of time left in the regular season for the team to kind of work things out and see how things are going to look. The big thing for me is that Randall, while definitely having an all-star season, an all-NBA campaign, unbelievable season, the best season of his career, one of the greatest offensive Knicks seasons of all time, comparable to some Carmelo Anthony offensive seasons. Like, I can't heap enough accolades on the level that Julius has played. The thing is that, at least per Cleaning the Glass, the Knicks are 7.9 points worse on defense when Julius is on the court, and that is the 5th percentile in the NBA. That is absolutely atrocious. Their defense gives up 3.6 percentage points in effective field goal percentage more, or worse performing when Julius is on the court. That is the 6th percentile in the NBA. And without Julius on the court, the Knicks defense gives up 109.1 points per possession. Again, this is per Cleaning the Glass, which is the 94th percentile in the NBA. So they become, I don't know what their ranking is defensively off the top of my head. I don't remember, but they go from wherever they are in the bottom, definitely in the bottom half of the NBA, to like right near the top, like a top 5 defense essentially without Julius Randle. So obviously he's going to be missed. He is the offensive focal point and an engine. But I don't think this means the Knicks are done. And I don't know if people believe that, if people think, if Randall's not in the first round, we're done, it's a wrap. I don't think so. I think the Knicks can change their style. I think we can see a more ball movement heavy style of offense from, an ISO heavy offense that is dead last in assist percentage. And even after the All-Star break is only like 3rd to last in assist percentage. So they haven't really changed that much. But, we were seeing a very tired Randall. Hopefully he gets well soon and he comes back refreshed. If not, I think we still have a chance moving forward. I think the defense is almost undoubtedly will be much improved without Randall on the court. And I think we're going to see some guys step up. I think we're going to see guys like Isaiah Hartenstein, who is absolutely hitting his stride right now, be able to run more pinch post action and be able to be more of a facilitator, like some of the role that he was playing in LA and in Denver. We're going to see other guys. Emmanuel Quickley has an absolute chance to, it's crazy to say this, has a chance to potentially command a max contract at some point. Maybe not this offseason, not a max extension, but he could put himself on a trajectory to command absolute max money, because a huge playoff performance from him as a number 2 guy on a team that's pushing into the second round and pushing for an Eastern Conference championship or final. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but a huge performance from Quickley is not out of the question. And like we talked about, like we always talk about, especially on these Casual Fridays, 3 through 9, this is the best team in the NBA. Like, it just is. 3 through 9, there's no, I mean, I've poured over every other roster. Nobody's close to the Knicks 3 through 9. So I don't think we're done. I think we'll be able to change some things up. I'm glad. horribly sad for the injury. I'm glad it's 2 weeks away from the playoffs. We have some time to work things out, and I'm still cautiously optimistic.
You know, I was thinking yesterday, like everyone says that the turning point for the season was them going to the 9-man rotation after the Dallas debacle and then beating Cleveland. I actually disagree. I think the turning point of this season was Monday, November 14th at a restaurant in Salt Lake City, Utah, and the players only meeting. Because if one of the biggest tropes that I heard on Twitter in the beginning of the season, which I always felt was not theoretically, absolutely untrue, was Tibbs has lost the team. No, Tibbs never lost a team. And I know Tibbs never lost a team because that they were facing the hardest back-to-back in North American sports at Utah, at Denver. And right then and there, they could have said, boys, let's get this dude out of here. And they could have rolled over like dogs, put in 2 stinker performances and got him out of there. They didn't. They won both of them. And that meeting was called by one Julius Randle. And now, to be fair, I remember at the time we were all like, dude, why are you calling the meeting? Like, you're the problem here, right? But I said to say they clearly believe in this guy. Like, whatever he's shoveling, they buy it. That matters going to these playoffs because, to XJ's point, there's going to have to be some changes. And I think to a man, for the most part, they believe in the changes that he's going to make. Because there's one thing I've realized about Tom Thibodeau, he is like a wounded wolf. Like, you have him in the corner, and that is when he will attack. So we'll probably see more ball movement. We'll probably see different type of sets. Maybe we'll see more Brunson and Obi pick and roll. Like, it's all there. Like, this is it's almost like I think we're gonna see Tom Thibodeau get into his bag these last couple games, and maybe in the playoffs we miss Randall for a game or two. Not because he wants to. Like, he's not like the offensive coordinator in football he's not like Mike Martz that wants to do a whole bunch of cool stuff and whatever. Like, but because he has to. So I'm fairly confident that this team will be fine for whatever that means in the playoffs, in air quotes. And I'm also prepared for this to be thrown back completely in my face when he does not adjust at all 1 second, and he's running Josh Hart at the 4, and we go out in 5. But I believe that there's an opportunity for us to do our best work because, as he says, the magic is in the work.
Yeah. As far as the playoffs go, I am not giving up on the playoffs. But before we even talk about the playoffs, I had a tweet that I put out maybe an hour and some change ago about how about how the New York Knicks and the next 6 weeks of New York Knicks basketball are going to define like the conversation around Knicks Twitter for a decade, because we're going to see what the Knicks look like for 2 weeks without Julius Randle. We're going to have some cupcakes in there. Don't get me wrong. But now, second option RJ is back on the table. Second option Quick is back on the table. Quentin Grimes, just like now we're looking at who is going to step up. And then you have people who think that this team is going to falter. Spoiler alert, they're not going to fall. Maybe famous last words, but I believe in my guys. And then as far as just what we can do in the playoffs, I think that Cleveland personally was always the perfect matchup for us because we have the guns to stop Donovan Mitchell. We have Josh Hart. We have Quentin Grimes. We have Emmanuel Quickly. We have Miles McBride. When it comes to superstars, very rarely do you have 4 guys on a team that are capable of slowing him down. I'm not going to disrespect Donovan Mitchell and say we can stop him, because when you are the superstar level of offensive talent that Donovan Mitchell is, nobody can stop you outright. But at the same time, Donovan Mitchell ain't stopping nobody either. So if Jalen Brunson is hopefully trending towards as healthy as we've seen him in a while, I like him against Donovan Mitchell. And if you don't like him against Donovan Mitchell, I'd like to remind you of Game 3 of the Western Conference first round of the playoffs, Utah Jazz versus the Dallas Mavericks, when Jalen Brunson put 41 in a victory against Donovan Mitchell's Utah Jazz without Luka Doncic playing. I like our chances against them with or without Julius Randle. And the one thing is, I'm not necessarily confident about Tom Thibodeau getting away from the ISO heavy stuff. I think that he's still going to run ISO Brunson. We may end up seeing more 3-5 pick and rolls with RJ and Mitchell Robinson. Those have been pretty useful. It's just Tom Thibodeau, man. I don't trust him to adjust.
Can we?
I don't.
Can we talk about this lazy narrative that like, oh, ISO, good luck with the ISO stuff in the playoffs? Like, do you watch playoff basketball?
That's all it is isolations.
Like, by game 4, I know what you're running. You know what I'm running. We know, like, it's like, all right, someone has to go make a play. So
yeah, it's all about who has the better player.
Yeah, so it's like I feel like that we've literally had 77 games of like, all right, getting ready to figure out who can make a play. And yes, listen, they will trap, especially with if Julius is gone, they'll trap Brunson, they'll get the ball out of his hands, they'll do things. But like, can we like that's just a lazy narrative that people I'm not with that at all.
I do want to say I mean that has historically been often the case where obviously ISOs go way up in the playoffs. And we're still going to see that. That's not going to change. But I do think some of the things that could change are where your offensive player gets to choose who they isolate against. So definitely Brunson's going to be trying to run ISOs. Ideally, it would be against that starting lineup for Cleveland. If we're assuming it's Cleveland, it would be against Donovan. The problem is that I think Cleveland has some tools and some tricks up their sleeve to make sure that it's really Okoro who is guarding Brunson. And in worst case scenario, it's actually Garland, who has actually been pretty good. And Brunson would roast Garland. But I'm just saying, like, I think that there's some tools like peel switching that we've seen happen to ensure that you can't just pick on a guy and just switch him on and you can just isolate him. They'll kind of trap him out up high and then rotate out the guy that they don't want to be the guy getting ISO'd. So they, the Knicks do some of that peel switching as well. And even like pre-rotating or pre-switching that they can do to make sure that the guy who's involved in the screen action is not the guy that Brunson wants to pick on. So I don't think it's going to be like it's definitely going to be heavy ISO ball. It's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to be like easy to just be like, hey, Brunson, let's just do Brunson versus Mitchell and just roast them all day. I think it's going to be more challenging than that.
And the last thing I want to say about the playoffs and these New York Knicks is our 5th ranked offense is based around one skill that is likely to go away in the playoffs, and that's offensive rebounding. It's not likely that teams are going to give you 2 and 3 chances in the playoffs, especially a team like Cleveland that has Jared Allen and Evan Mobley in the paint. Essentially, they're starting 2 centers. It's tough for me to look. I think we match up great against Cleveland. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want us riding high on this 5th ranked offense because it is the 5th ranked offense in the regular season, and regular season basketball is different from postseason basketball. We have to honor that. We have to recognize that. And we have to have conversations around what historically works in the playoffs. What works in the playoffs is my guy is better than your guy. And I know that because he makes his shot on the first try. That is very important in playoff basketball. And that worries me a little bit with the Knicks. That is the only thing that I'm worried about. I don't believe that this is the 18th ranked defense in the NBA. I think they're better than that. I think they've gotten a little lazy because of not lazy. I think they've fallen back because of just they're getting tired, and it's hard to keep up that intensity for 82 games. But I think the defense will show up in the playoffs. It's the offense I'm worried about. And I think we couldn't have a conversation about the playoffs without talking about the offensive rebounding, because that has been the New York Knicks identity on offense. and it's going to be tough to do that against a team in a 7-game series, because you're going to beat them game 1 or game 2. You're going to destroy them on the glass. And then Bickerstaff is going to look his guys in the face and say, listen, we cannot let these guys out rebound us by double digits. We have to attack the glass. And that's when you start seeing teams crash the glass and give up fast break points. Playoff tempo slows down. It's important. It is very, very important the Knicks find ways to get easy baskets going forward. And I think we'll start to see the walls crack a little bit in the playoffs. I still think we can beat Cleveland, but I think that's going to get exposed.
And I'll say this, since Tibbs went to the 9-man rotation on December 4th, the Knicks they're tied for 10th in defensive rating with the Oklahoma City Thunder. So, and listen, I've said it, John Macri said it. Listen, Tom Thibodeau, if you should have a top 10 defense with Tom Thibodeau as your head coach. And since he got the guys, since he got the rotation you wanted with a healthy Mitch, with a healthy Grimes, and certain people out of the rotation, they're top 10. So to your point, we'll take a step back offensively. So will they. Defensively, things step up. We'll take a step up defensively. So will they. And we'll see how it plays out. So
last thing I was going to say on that is, yeah, especially with the Randall off the court, this is probably, I believe, and we'll see if that's true. This is probably an elite defense in the NBA. So it's tough to have a top ranked defense if your two best players who are getting the most minutes are Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle.
One guy's a traffic cone, the other guy plays popcorn defense.
Exactly. So it's just tough to have like a top 10 defense when those are your two main guys who are just out there constantly. So with Randle off the court, I think we'll see a better defense. But to Mensa's point, we're now going against what has been the top defense in the NBA the entire season, essentially, or at least for the bulk of it. So defensive struggle is going to be tough, but I think there's hope. I think there's hope.
All right. And with that, that is it for Casual Friday. Shout out to XJ. Shout out to Mensa. Shout out to GMAC. Shout out to APJP behind the scenes on the ones and twos. So listen, if you like what you heard and you are not a subscriber, make sure you subscribe to Knicks Film School on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcast app you choose. If you are on Apple Podcasts, please drop us a 5-star review. It really helps us as we shoot up the rankings to become ultimately the number one basketball podcast in the United States of America and hopefully the world. And if it's less than 5 stars, do me a favor, just keep it to yourself. Coming up this week, we have me and Chris Persian will do study hall probably on Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. So check us out for that. John and Jeremy will be back next week for another podcast. Andrew will be doing, hopefully when he gets his voice back, he'll be doing more pre-games. Something tells me we're going to have a lot of pre-games with the Cleveland Cavaliers upcoming. And please check out Benji stuff at Rit Holtzman on Twitter. Him and DJ Zulo, Ace_Zulo. Wait a minute. Is it DJ _Zulo?
You had it right. I think it's Ace_Zulo.
Ace_Zulo. Amazing film breakdowns. Check out Dream of Chris Persianen. He just released episode 3 or 4, I believe, or if it included on Tuesday, which included his big board. So check that out. And if you're not a patron, please subscribe. Well, I'm not going to beg you, but you should be a patron if you listen to this show. Listen, you can get in for at least $7 a month, and that $7 a month will get you access to an extra podcast a week, all the newsletters, and access to our playbacks where you can see me and XJ argue about load management in real time.
It's worth it. It's worth it, guys.
As I curse and scream things in Spanish. It's wonderful. It's wonderful content, guys.
And you can hear me make fun of our patrons who have the audacity to try to shade me because I bet on the 2 3-pointers to be made in the first 3 minutes of a game. Hey, I like money. So for these fine gentlemen, I'm Shawn for W. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Knicks Nation, let's ride.